Hey, everybody. Welcome to Latched Podcast. It's Melissa here. We are trying something new today. For those of you who have never listened to the Latched Podcast, this is a podcast for moms and parents everywhere, especially those of you who are in the trenches, kind of getting through day to day. We talk about hard stuff, easy stuff, funny stuff, and we try and just kind of keep everybody as connected as possible. Today, we have a really, really fun thing that we're going to talk about. We are talking to NJ May, who is leading up this amazing project that is really studying and digging into pandemic babies and kind of what we've all gone through over the past couple years. Oh God, I can't believe it's been a couple years in terms of the pandemic and being moms and having babies. You're listening to Latched Mama Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Wirt, busy mom of 6 and owner of LatchedMama.com. Join us each week as we talk about pregnancy, breastfeeding, postpartum, and all things motherhood. Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. And can I just say, I'm so happy to be the first person to try this way of technology and being on the podcast.
It's interesting. The bright light in my face. I probably should have done some more makeup this morning, but it's fine. That's not why we're here. We're here to hang out in all of our Friday afternoon sunshine glory. So, where are you coming? Where are you right now? And tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So, hey everyone, my name is NJ Russell Camara, and I'm currently in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is not 29 degrees. It's in the 60s.
It's awesome. I love it. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what got you started on this project, kind of what it is. Give us kind of the rundown.
Absolutely. So I come to this space as a proud mom, first-time mom of a soon-to-be 9-month-old baby. A baby girl. She was born in July, and it's such a journey. Like, I get it now. I get what everyone says when people are just like obsessed with their babies. I come from a performing arts background. I got my MFA from UC San Diego in acting, and I've also been on a journey of just like really striking up community engagement, community conversations as a way of healing, especially during this time where there's a lot going on. Like, that's nothing new. But what can we do to continue to sow seeing people and hearing people and empathy and curiosity? Yeah. So that's where my community engagement and my performing arts background sort of come together. I also love steak burritos.
I love it. Do you guys have good burritos out in Wisconsin?
We could. We could improve. Yeah. But having lived in California for a time, I'm a big fan of their California burritos.
Yeah. I don't know if Wisconsin's really known for their burritos, really. I don't know.
It depends on where you go, right? Depends on the restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. So what brought you towards studying this or gathering these stories from people about kind of being a mom during the pandemic?
Absolutely. So first, I want to say that it's amazing all the different things that we can do as moms and find time to do. And one of the things that I tried to find time to do was just to, at nighttime, take a class 1 day a week. And it was a self-expression and leadership class. And we were tasked with an assignment to start a project that had nothing to do with work.
Okay.
And something that you cared about and you could do every day. I was like, okay. I love talking about my child. And and I reflected on a conversation I had with a pregnant mom who said that the reason why pandemic babies are so advanced is because their mothers got to work from home and were less stressed. Because there's a lot of TikTok and Instagram videos going on about these pandemic babies. Some of you listeners probably seen it. And I thought, well, I was really stressed during the pandemic, and at the time there wasn't a vaccine, and I had so much morning sickness. So I thought, okay, why don't I create a project that documents and archives and makes history of what people actually went through giving birth, adopting, being pregnant during the pandemic, and see, like, were people less stressed? How many people did get to work from home and were they less stressed?
It's so funny because, like, at Latched Mama, I mean, I have 6 kids now. So the beginning of the pandemic, when, there wasn't a vaccine and, what were we going to do? I had a young baby, but not so young that, if she got a fever, it was going to be a bad thing or anything like that, and we were pretty locked down, which was good. But it was very interesting because at Latch Mama, we, have people who work for us who have babies and they bring them to work. So the stress feeling was definitely there. But it wasn't until I got pregnant while the pandemic was still going on, because I feel like it's been lasting forever, that I really, really started to feel that, oh my gosh, like what happens if I get COVID? Like, what is this? What is this? This study says this, but this study says that. And should I get vaccinated and should I not? And are there studies? Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine somebody being less stressed during the pandemic with a baby than, not.
Yeah,
So,
especially when you were pregnant before the vaccine, or when the vaccine came out and you were like, should I take this? What's the science on this?
Yeah, because there wasn't any, because nobody, I guess it's hard to test pregnant women with the vaccine, but that's a whole nother thing. But so tell me a little bit about what you found out by gathering these stories.
I found out that, first of all, a lot of people were really excited to just share their story. To just talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just a consequence of just the different layers of isolation.
Yep. 100%.
I found out that not everybody felt open to sharing their story necessarily just in everyday life, because if they did get to work from home, sometimes people didn't find that they, that they had it okay compared to other people that were essential workers. So they didn't like to compare themselves to essential workers, and they thought, well, can I complain? Working from home was a privilege, but also when digging into their stories of isolation, it's like, no, your isolation was valid even though you got to work from home.
Absolutely. And isn't that just motherhood in general? Like, I feel like we're always comparing our struggles with others and, do we have it harder? Do we have it easier? Like, it's such kind of like a micro look at like motherhood in general and why it is so isolating, even outside of a pandemic, but what a cool thing to kind of dial down to is like, hey, you know what? No, your feelings are valid, and your story is worthy of being told as well. Did you see any stories of children actually being more advanced?
No one actually shared if their child was advanced or not. Really, what people were really talking about was just what did they experience? What did they go through? And I appreciate that, because we want to leave it up to the listener to make up for themselves. What do you think about that social theory? Do you think that, hearing the story, do you think that people were less stressed? And also, if a child is more advanced because of the pandemic, on a certain level, it's just like, who cares? It's not really about that, right? It's
absolutely.
Not really about, it's really giving voice to the parents.
100%. So do you want to share a story or two that like really hit you or really had like a resounding effect? I mean, I know we want people to go read them all, but are there any memories that you have through gathering these stories that you were like, oh my gosh, this is such important work that I'm doing. It's such healing work.
Absolutely. I was speaking to a mom who was talking about her experience with doing IVF.
Okay.
And there was a moment where she shared that people think about the COVID affecting the shortage supplies, or the shortage in the chain supplies.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah.
And there was a moment where she went to the pharmacy and they weren't sure if they had her IVF medication.
Wow.
And if they didn't have the medication, she would have been out of all that money. And it's expensive, depending on who you are and the medication. I mean, you're up to the teens, thousands with IVF medication.
I had never even thought of that.
Yep. Yeah. And so luckily, they did find her medication in stock. But she couldn't guarantee that that was the case for everybody else experiencing, going through IVF.
Yeah.
And it made me think, this is really important work. I mean, let's get a consumer reporter in here, and there's a story right there about, chain supply issues and shortage of IVF medication, just right there. Or
Yeah.
another one that particularly sticks out to me, and this is on the East Coast, actually. The first one was in the Midwest. And this one on the East Coast is a mom talking about how she's from, she's from Africa and she's Muslim. And that postpartum depression was affecting her significantly during COVID. And it's not talked about in her culture.
Wow.
And she is tired of suffering in silence.
Wow.
She wants to talk about this because she wants other people in her culture to acknowledge this is a big deal. Postpartum depression, especially in this layer of COVID with isolation, it's real, and you got to speak up and do something about it.
Wow. That's fascinating. As I mean, if you look at the IVF story, there were news organizations and there were people who covered the fact that a lot of IVFs were canceled just because of the in office, procedures and stuff like that. So but they weren't out the money. I didn't hear any stories, nor had I even thought about the idea that they could be canceled in the middle of the process, just simply because of, supply chain issues, like you said.
And that particular participant was told that she initially she wasn't going to go. She was told that she couldn't go through with IVF or IUI at first because it wasn't deemed as essential.
Wow. Wow. And then you pull on the postpartum depression, where as a society we are so ill-equipped to help our moms in the postpartum period. And then you add on a layer of, like you said, the COVID stress and the COVID isolation on top of that. And then you add on, I guess in this case as well, the cultural component. And what a recipe for just so much sadness and depression and isolation even then.
Yes, I also forgot a very important component to this whole project, because we do have some funny stories out there. Don't get me wrong. The very important component is that this project, even though we're called the Pandemic Pregnancy Project, this limited series of 21 stories collected across the United States is a part of a series called Pandemic Pregnancies and Popsicles! And that popsicle part is to what can we gain as something sweet from each of these stories. And the reason why I bring that up is because it's not sharing a sad or a traumatic or a complex story for that sake. Even though being heard is so important, but really, what's the thing that we leave the listener with to do in their lives or to think about? Something hopeful, something humorous, some deep surrender, grace, something sweet to walk away with. And it's beautiful that these stories run the gamut, and each of these IVF stories, a woman who's Muslim and from an African country, there's something sweet that they give.
Yeah. I mean, just sharing their story with us is giving us something, and what the takeaway is. So what has been your greatest takeaway through this whole project and through the time and the hours you've spent on it?
Yeah. My greatest takeaway is that even if you are, no matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, community is necessary. Community 100%. Is an essential part of vitality. Honestly.
Yeah. So so a greater picture. So the pandemic is, I don't know whether you want to say it's over or not over, or we're in a little bit of a easier time with it. Who knows? It's all so hard to figure out when it stops or when it changes or when it ends or if it ever does. But what do you think we can do moving forward to kind of connect moms, whether we're in a pandemic period or whether we're not? And how do we start listening to these stories and supporting each other and bringing each other together?
That's a great question. I would say, the first thing is we always need to lead with curiosity. And we have to show people that their stories matter. I would say people reach out into your own communities and see how does your community deal with looking at pregnant women, people who've adopted, people who are trying to get pregnant. How do we even look at something as parental leave? what about the and even across the world, what about the mothers who have to leave their kids in order to take care of someone else's child?
Yep.
How do we extend this globally?
Yeah. I mean, it's such an important conversation, and I think probably part of the solution I found through running Latch Mama and literally touching women every single day and trying to listen to their stories is that honestly the first step is just giving them a voice, and the first step is saying, "Hey, I'm a safe place. Like, talk to us." Within our Facebook group, Latch Mama Love, we see so many women who are just like, "I'm not here for any other reason than just to vent. Can you please listen to what's happening in my life?" And those opportunities, I feel like, where especially women who are at home with their kids or at work with their kids or, growing and building their families, there are so few places for them to share without judgment. And I think that that's what we need to start focusing on as kind of a tribe of mothers is, like you just said, your story is valid. No matter whether you think somebody has had it harder or easier or less privileged, more privileged, what you're currently feeling is valid. And I feel like that is the message that we need to start expressing. And so much of what you've said is that, there's a takeaway from hearing everybody's story,
There's room to hear all. Hearing someone's story does not, I don't come from a scarcity mindset. Hearing one story does not take away from another person's story. All stories can be heard, because we all need each other. We all need to see each other.
Absolutely. And I think it's only then do you gain perspective and you gain empathy and acceptance and like that curiosity word, I think, is one that just needs to be used so much more. I love it. I love the beautiful and simplicity of somebody saying, I just live a curious life. And it's such a beautiful thing, I feel like, because it's truly in connecting with others. I feel like that we grow as a community and we grow personally.
Absolutely. And that listening aspect, like truly listening to someone else without listening to yourself first.
Yeah.
Coming to the conversation with not already always listening. And from that space, we can start to talk about what legislation needs to change.
Yeah.
What socioeconomic, issues are there that, if you are a person of privilege, what can you do about it?
100%. So what are your goals for what you've done? Talk to me a little bit about how we can help you push this forward, how we can help. I don't know. I love the people who are out there trying to bring people together who are listening. And I would love to try and support this project as much as we can and move it forward and move it to the next great thing that, you start to do. So,
well, we really appreciate it. And I will say the first thing is really, we want to archive and we're making history of these stories. And what that looks like is we're putting it on our website, we're putting it on our social media pages, we're putting it on podcasts like yours, radio stations, so that people have access and can look at these stories, can listen to these stories and see themselves reflected as another part of being human during the pandemic. And that's so important. And I say that because I know that Pandemic Pregnancy Project is not the first to be talking about pandemic pregnancies. We're not, but also if you look at some of these newspapers, they've gathered stories. You hear about that, and we're then given data and statistics, and we're supposed to digest that. That's great at the end of the day when we are trying to make legislation, but also when we're trying to breed empathy, that's not always helpful. I don't want to always hear statistics and data. I want to read someone's actual story. If someone says, I wasn't someone who planned on having kids, and I did, and I'm glad that I did, and it happened during the pandemic. Look what that creates. And so that's a goal. And also, seeing where this project goes, we're working on the possibility of creating a documentary. Right now, all of our stories have been submitted are anonymous. And now we're going to get to a part where how do we also get more stories of people who don't want to be anonymous? And how do we really get the country to pay attention to what this moment was like? To give life when life is being lost around you.
It's so crazy because I did more press as a business owner during the pandemic than I ever have. And it was interview after interview after interview, and they were all about statistically what the pandemic was doing to my business or what it looked like for moms in the workforce. And I wanted to sometimes shout into the phone, like, you all are covering the wrong thing. You all are not covering what this is truly doing to mothers everywhere. Yeah. And I mean, what I got to cover was what we were doing as a business, which was definitely more than others were. And I was doing my part or whatever, but I just wanted to like literally tell them what to cover. And at one point I would send emails to the reporters that I had worked with. And I was like, this is what we need to be talking about. Like, we need to be talking about the lack of support. We need to be talking about a maternal health care system that was already broken. And now you're not letting partners in the birthing room. You're not letting doulas in there. You know, there's no postpartum support at all, when there was very little before, but now there's none because nobody can be together. I mean, but nobody was covering it. Nobody was sharing these stories without an agenda. And that's what I love, is I love the fact that if you even were to label what you're doing with an agenda, it would literally be to breed curiosity and empathy and community, which are things that are so needed within motherhood. Which I think is this beautiful thing. It's really funny. I mean, to be completely honest with you, Karen, who helps us book our podcast guests, she was like, Melissa, we had an email and she's doing this thing. It's like, well, like, what's her revenue model? Like what is she trying to accomplish? And I would ask her the question and she's like, I don't really know. And then she'd ask it again, and then I'd ask it again. And then finally I was like, maybe she's just literally trying to do the right thing, which is share these stories and bring attention to the fact that this was a very, very, very big and in somewhat traumatic thing for most mothers in the United States over the past 2 years, and I think that you are such a breath of fresh air, because it's exactly, I feel like, what you're trying to do, and you're the real thing. You're truly trying to share these stories in a way that breeds curiosity and empathy, and it's a gift. It is such a gift, because I don't know a whole lot about history, but I do know that when we just keep going on news cycles and we move to the next news cycle and we move to the next one, you don't really learn anything, And I think that what you're doing is amazing, because you are preserving it in history, and we are saying, hey, if this ever does happen again, we need to do a much better job, We
do. And I thank you for what you said. There is room in our society right now for simple storytelling, for people 100%. To see each other.
Yeah.
Period. Statistics are helpful. Data is helpful. Absolutely. I'm not saying that it's not. We need that. We also need balance.
And I think it's interesting, though, because we're in a world where, we are results driven. And I think that is what happened, is that the pandemic happened. And suddenly you get up every day, you go to work, you come home, you take care of your kids, you go to bed, or you get up every day, you provide for your family, you work from home, you do whatever. But like, all of a sudden, A plus B didn't equal C, or 1 plus 1 didn't equal 2. And we had to be creative, and we had to think outside of the box. And I think with that becomes less statistics. I think with that, you need to talk about emotion, and you need to talk about feeling, and you need to talk about the other aspects of what happened during this time. You can't just consistently think about legislation and statistics. You need to think about what this is literally doing emotionally to especially our parents. I mean, it's just so funny how, like, it's mind-blowing. Even I was in it, like, you're home with your kids. I was running a business. I was trying to, like, I still think about this sometimes, like, those first few months of the pandemic, I didn't know if it was going to kill my employees if they touched it. Remember at the very, very beginning, and was it going to kill everybody? Like, what were the statistics of who it was actually going to put in the hospital? Could I leave my business open? If I had to close my business, what did that mean for my 40 employees? Were they going to be able to eat, or would they have someplace to live? What was it like? Literally, schools got canceled, overnight here in Virginia. And you start to forget about it. And I think it's probably some of a trauma response. Some of it is because, they want you to forget about it. They meaning like the media, because we move on to other things. But these stories are so important.
They are important, and we can't forget, because it brought so many things to surface. It also brought a lot of people together. It made a lot of people really creative.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that feeling.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because when this first started, and like maybe like a year and a half into it, everybody was like, this is going to change the way women are looked at in society. Women are never going to be devalued again. You know, look at these women who are at home. They're still working 40 hours a week. They have babies on their lap. They're trying to do all of this, you know, and they'll never be devalued again. No, nobody's talking about that now. You know, nobody's saying, look what they did. Everybody's saying, all right, let's move on. What's the next topic? There's a little bit more talk, but I think that's just a change in administration on parental leave. But still, there's still no mandatory parental leave in the United States. You know, it hasn't changed anything.
Right. And that's where I'm like, we do need legislation. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
That affects so many of us systemically. And we also need to see human beings.
Yeah. But if you literally just focus on the statistics, yeah, everybody's better now. You know, not everybody, but the statistics would tell you that people are back at work. People have been vaccinated. Statistics are great. We're going to move on and talk about something else. But I think that there's so much space to still go back and process what happened and still share those stories and still learn and say, hey, you know what? Something like this may happen again in society. How can we be more prepared? Like,
that's right.
How can we be ready to support the mothers who seem to be going to have to take the majority of the responsibility because they took it during the pandemic? And, you know, I don't know. It's just fascinating. And I just love the idea of what you did. And I love the idea that the agenda was curiosity and empathy and literally community building, because it is 100% what is needed in motherhood, as well as, you know, just historically, I feel like for the pandemic, so we don't forget what happened. I don't know.
Thanks.
I think it's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thanks. That's the power of the arts during such complex times, right?
I love it. What else? Anything else you want to leave us with? So the pandemicpregnancyproject.com, correct?
Yeah. Well, I got a couple stories.
All right, yes,
I'd love
come
to
on.
share.
Yes,
there's time.
Please. Yes, 100%.
Okay. So this is a story. Age 35, Wisconsin. This piece is titled, "What's Going On Down There?" So both of my babies are pandemic babies because they are 14 months apart. You should also know that I work in healthcare. So with both pregnancies, but particularly my first pregnancy, I was really in the thick of it. I got sick with COVID with my first daughter during my second trimester, which was March 2020. It was terrible. I had a pretty severe case of it. So I was in the first round of people before anybody really knew anything. And at that point, too, there weren't enough tests. I luckily got a test because I was pregnant and I work in healthcare. And at that time, it was also taking 7 days for test results. I was severely symptomatic for 4 weeks, and then I was a long hauler. So, pregnant with my first daughter, I isolated at home 2 weeks before my due date because we wanted to make sure I didn't have COVID at delivery. I had my doctor test me to see if I had antibodies, because if I had antibodies, then it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. And my doctor says to me, if you don't have antibodies, then there's no hope for any of us. So I'm sure you'll be fine. I do the test. She calls me 3 days later and she's like, forget what I said. You don't have any antibodies. You'll still be fine. Just isolate. So I'm back in full quarantine when my due date arrives. Nothing happens to my body. Then another day goes by and it ends up being another full 8 days. I say to my doctor, I can't do this anymore. She's like, all right, we'll just induce you. And when it comes time to push, and I did a really good job, I pushed her out in 20 minutes. We had this kind of guessing game of how big she was going to be, and my doctor kept saying, I think she's 7 pounds. And she pulls around and she's like, this ain't no 7-pound baby. They take her over and they have the NICU team where they're just, there because they want to make sure everything's okay. And they're back in the corner and they yell out, she's 9.5 pounds and she's got 2 teeth. No, really. I yelled, did they just say she has teeth? My doctor was like, yes, they did. I said to my husband, I was like, you need to get over there because I don't know what is happening. So basically, I gave birth to a toddler. My daughter was born very large and with 2 full teeth right in the front of her lower. And I mean, with my second baby, I was induced because at 35, you're technically geriatric. And I was dilating but having no contractions. And they were going to send me back home. But before they did, the doctor said, let's check for the baby. And so he sticks his hand up there. And I didn't understand what was going on. And his face just drops. And I'm thinking, what is going on down there? He's hanging out there for a little too long. And he says, I just want you to know your baby is currently shaking my hand. All 5 fingers are wrapped around my finger. Right then, I didn't know what to do. And he's like, okay, well, maybe I should check if that's the umbilical cord. And he does an ultrasound, and it shows her hand above her head, and she's wiggling her fingers and waving at us. And he goes, well, you can go home now, and I'm sure your water will break soon because she'll just punch through the sack. Another week and a half, and then she eventually decided to punch through. And all of this to say, as a person who suffered from COVID and is a long hauler, I'm lucky to be healthier than expected with 2 pandemic babies, knock on wood, who are just fine. Wow. They just turned out to be very, very large. And whoever is listening to this, I just want to say, be kind to yourself and kind of let go of any expectations. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Enjoy the moment you're in now.
Aww,
so
I
that was
love
from a mom in Wisconsin. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Wow. Yeah.
And
big babies.
Big babies. And the last thing I will say is I wanted to give each of our participants a little highlight. So I just grabbed a little snippet from each story, and I'd love to.
That's fantastic. Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. So, all right, y'all, from across our country, here we go. Texas, age 38. I forced myself to engage my partner in a baby moon, and it was risky to travel. And so we decided to drive to the ocean at Corpus Christi. So I was taking a lot of risks here, a COVID risk, a risk of traveling with someone who I was not getting along with, and I don't want to get into that, the possibility of a hurricane. And we went down there, and I feel emotional just thinking about it, but like, I felt so beautiful that day. I felt free about myself and my body. I felt that I was unlocking the next level of adulthood in a video game. Wisconsin, age 29. So everyone thinks about the supply chain issues we had throughout the pandemic. It didn't affect just toilet paper. It also affected IVF meds. Luckily, the specialty pharmacy had mine. And I just really hope that for those that do choose to do IVF during the pandemic, that they get their miracle babies too. Also, Wisconsin, age 30. I remember sharing with a friend how sad and kind of scary it was that my husband couldn't come to my appointments with me. And she was like, you're not by yourself. The baby's with you. Aww. And that was the beginning of my need for my baby. Of course, I'm her comfort. She's in my womb, but she's also my comfort. It's her and I together. Arlington, Virginia, age 36. I got this really elegant dress. It made me think of Camelot, like when I was looking at it. It just made me think of like Maid Marian, something she would have worn. And it was just really cool. And in this pretty cool and elegant dress with the empire waist, all you could see was from the waist up. I mean, that's how Zoom works, right? Something completely different from what I would have worn pre-pandemic. And it makes sense for me to be wearing something, just completely different from what I did before because I'm entering a new phase in my life of becoming a new mother. Wisconsin, age 32. The mental struggle, I was very fortunate. I had friends who I was able to talk to, but it's hard because people still aren't going out because of COVID. It's hard to black out what's happening, but enjoy those little moments with your baby because you can get so wrapped up in what's happening and kind of forget how lucky you are. And I was really lucky to have my sister. Also, Wisconsin, age 31, give yourself grace. You just have to know yourself, I guess. It helps if you figure out your people before the baby comes. The people are going to stay by you. Those people who are going to be by you and respect you and respect your comfort levels once your baby's here. California, age 36. My husband wasn't able to come to the appointments. And alone with this technician, she was so sweet. She just acknowledged what happened because, with pregnancy loss and stuff, it's not talked about a lot. And her acknowledgement, I mean, it sounds silly, but that made a difference. I didn't have to explain it to her because she saw it in my chart and I didn't have to rehash everything. It's like I just felt seen. Wisconsin, age 35. As a person who suffered from COVID, I'm lucky to be healthier than expected and with 2 pandemic babies who are just fine. Whoever's listening to this, I just want to say be kind to yourself. Let go of any expectations. Enjoy the moment you're in now. Also, Wisconsin, age 29. Give yourself grace. Embrace little moments. Whether it's exactly what you expected or completely different, it's so hard to be a parent in general. And then add a pandemic on top of it, you've got to cut yourself some slack. Maine, age 30. One thing that's kind of beautiful about the pandemic is it's definitely forced me and my husband to get really, really good at communicating with each other, especially around caring for our son. Wisconsin, age 32. When I delivered my rainbow baby, the COVID protocols allowed my husband to be in that room with me, and we had done this together, and we're in life together. And I saw everything hit him so beautifully, and I thought, that is my husband. And with so much going on around in the world, I'll never forget that moment with him. Wisconsin, age 35. Prior to finding out that I was pregnant, it was never like a goal. It wasn't something I'd wanted. So like when it did happen, this pandemic is happening and our whole world is being crazily affected. It ended up being something I looked forward to. Just like, I can't believe this is real, and there's just a little bit of light in all of this darkness. It's kind of magical. Chicago, age 34. Pandemic pregnancy felt really lonely. I so badly wanted to share the time with loved ones, to feel physically and emotionally their excitement. Mourning that experience I thought I'd have and kind of dreamt about for so much of my life. And on the other hand, that isolation was like a wonderful warm cocoon that my husband and I shared. A precious moment in time in our lives that felt truly ours. Wisconsin, age 31. I think one of the most poignant and interesting things was actually before I was pregnant. You know that COVID baby joke? Everyone is having babies on accident because they're just stuck together in quarantine. So we definitely got that joke. But when we announced the pregnancy, I was very open about this baby not being an oopsie COVID baby. We went through the fertility treatments. This took a long time. And we definitely were not trying to be pregnant during the pandemic. We were trying to be pregnant before. Wisconsin, age 27. My husband had to wear his mask the whole time at our birth. And I know he would have loved that experience for the first time of hugging the baby, kissing her, and he couldn't take his mask off. But he was relieved. There was nothing wrong with her. And he wanted me to hold her right away because I didn't get the chance with my son. So he made it possible this time because that's one thing that I told him that I really wanted. Maryland, age 35. I went through postpartum depression with my first child, and I didn't want to experience that again in my life, ever. We ended up getting pregnant again. I am African and Muslim, and when you talk about this kind of stuff, some people might judge and say, oh, you don't have a strong faith, when postpartum depression has nothing to do with having a strong faith. A lot of women don't talk about their experience with this. I was like that too. And at the beginning, I didn't even tell my mom about it. There are so many of us out there suffering in silence, and I refuse to suffer in silence anymore. Wisconsin, age 34. I went into my plan for my birth, and it was unmedicated. When it was all over and I had my C-section, I was like, beside my beautiful little daughter being here now, what did I plan for that actually came to fruition? Not wearing a mask during birth. Everything else changed. It's important to just be open to any and all possibilities. We just got a few more here. Also in Wisconsin. During my entire pregnancy in Milwaukee County at my clinic, I couldn't have a guest. I couldn't have a visitor go with me to any of my appointments because of COVID. And I lost that opportunity to have that bond with my husband, experiencing these new milestones. But when our daughter was born, he was there, and they put her on my chest, and I just looked at her and said, "You're gonna be one badass bitch." My OB was shocked. Finally, after I'd done this amazing thing of giving birth, we both felt badass. Illinois, age 39. Even as I got bigger, my pregnancy didn't feel totally real. And I finally realized that when you're out and about and people you meet will randomly affirm your experience, I was sort of preparing for people to ask me when I was due or make comments that never happened because I was almost never out. And I realized that not having that external acknowledgement was weirdly lonely. It was just another way for that isolation and loneliness to reveal itself. And around my 8th or 9th month, I was in the middle of a Home Depot run, and I walked up to this lady at the cash register, and she asked, or I asked, "Are you open?" And then she said, "Yeah, just don't have that baby in my line." And I said, "Oh, I won't." And then she started talking to me about it and telling me her birth stories. And it was just a silly joke that made its way into my reality, but it was so touching to me because I just felt like she saw me. And that meant so much to have that one really simple interaction at the Home Depot. It was one of the only interactions I can remember having with just a person, a random person. And here we go with our last two. Wisconsin, age 42. I think the biggest thing is really just embracing this time and knowing how precious it is. What a blessing it is to be able to give and provide and to give birth. How special those moments and those 9 months are, and really choosing how to live it. Also Wisconsin, age 31. There are some days where I look at her and I'm still like, you came out of my body. It's just amazing that through the moments of stress, being at home, working 2 full-time jobs, freelance artist, doing campaign work, all during a pandemic, I see her and I say, you are so happy. You're so present. You're just lovely.
Aww.
I just wanted to really highlight all of our participants and give them a moment. Give them a moment to
those are such cool stories and such wonderful gifts that they give back to us, you know, like you said, the popsicles part. It's so wonderful to hear those and like realize how much almost optimism there is in some of those stories that are not awesome moments, you know. I mean, they're beautiful moments because there's babies, but what a wonderful gift that they gave us by being willing to share all of that stuff with us, you know?
Thanks. Yeah. And that optimism right there.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of these participants, they don't look at it as optimism. Yep. And sometimes that optimism can be confused with like a Pollyanna type storytelling. Yeah. But where they got those from comes from a place of resilience. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're out to get.
Absolutely.
That's really, and that resilience is not easy.
Yeah.
But it can happen.
Yeah.
And we dig deep and we create community, as I was saying earlier, even if it's just creating space to be heard like this.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, you are such a gift. Thank you. And your project is a gift, and thank you for being curious and doing the work. And I think in some ways helping us all heal a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on this podcast.
We're gonna put this out there. We're gonna leave all of your links in the show notes, so everybody go check it out, give it a share, share it across whatever platforms you all have, and let's get those stories out there and let's build some community. And I cannot wait to hear what you do next. So will you stay in touch with us, please?
I sure will. It's gonna involve some events, hopefully some performances. We'll see.
I love it. Well, you've got some fans over at Latched Mama, so you stay in touch with us, okay? And thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.